It's not often that I get the chance to talk about Ace Attorney. It's actually one of my favorite game franchises of all time. I initially played the first Phoenix Wright game, then skipped straight to Apollo Justice, then did the entire Great Ace Attorney duology, and finally Dual Destinies.
You skipped two entire games in the main series. That's not how you're supposed to play them.
I'll explain the story behind that some other time, but I decided it was about time I came back and actually finished the last two games of the original trilogy. But as I replayed the trilogy from the very beginning, I started to notice some things that I found really interesting. And not from a game reviewer's perspective, but as a game developer instead. To understand what I'm talking about, we'll first have to discuss the choice of genre for the Ace Attorney series. Of course, looking at how successful the games are today, it's easy to say that the visual novel genre was an excellent choice for Ace Attorney. But think back to before the first Phoenix Wright game was released. In a time when Capcom's most successful titles were Mega Man, Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and Marvel vs. Capcom, having Shu Takumi pitch the idea of "why don't we make a game about lawyers fighting in courtrooms" was probably met with a lot of raised eyebrows. And after finally being given the opportunity to work on Takumi's game idea along with an extremely tight budget from Capcom, the visual novel genre became less of a choice and more of a necessity. Also, the game was set to release on the Game Boy Advance, which imposed several hardware restrictions on the team as well. For a game that is so expressive and wants to deliver so much emotion through its stories, the genre choice really only leaves three places for us to work with: the visuals of the game, text, which is delivered through dialogue boxes, and audio through sound effects and music. As I will further discuss, however, the audio avenue is really the only place that this game could use. Now, Shu Takumi had to work around problems. A lot of problems. Firstly, the entire game has to fit on a cartridge with a maximum size of 8 megabytes. Some GBA games have special cartridges with bigger data sizes, but I have no idea if that was within the Ace Attorney development budget. From our three possible avenues of delivering emotion, the visuals offer us very little to play around with. The limited animation is kind of the whole budget-saving point of using the visual novel style. Even still, Ace Attorney does a phenomenal job with its animation, a point that is discussed in this video much better than I ever could, and will be linked in the description below. Text on its own has tremendous power to deliver emotion and imagery if only we were given the option of prose writing, which is the type of literature found in storybooks, textbooks, novels, and newspapers. Visual novels, on the other hand, only offer text through dialogue, on top of which we're restricted from narration because the games take place from the first-person perspective of Phoenix Wright or some other lawyer depending on which game you're playing. That doesn't mean that dialogue cannot deliver emotion. In fact, quite the opposite, as you'll find heavy use of interjection such as and in Ace Attorney's dialogue. However, you should remember that the dialogue in this game doesn't just serve to deliver emotion but also has to get an entire story across to the player. The most amount of wiggle room you're given then lies in the audio department, with your only real restriction being the 8-bit sound capabilities of the GBA. And boy, is the development team efficient with their use of audio, with 66 sound effects and 27 music tracks on the original GBA version. Ace Attorney is not afraid to show its sound effects. Almost every objection is accompanied by a witness outburst or a thought-provoking idea, or just leaving the prosecution exasperated and dumbfounded. You'll come across many loud personalities such as Detective Gumshoe, Laura Hart, and Wendy Olbag. Of course, there's special sound effects for when Maya does something exceptionally stupid, which is basically all the time. Ace Attorney uses the same handful of sound effects to express all these different characters with such varying personalities. But while sound effects make up for very important sections of player feedback and game juice, any Ace Attorney fan will tell you that the music of this series is where the games shine the most. A change in the game's soundtrack is a huge indicator to the player, telling them that they've progressed in the story and can completely change the atmosphere of the game. One second you might be in a happy-go-lucky investigative mood until suddenly you find a piece of evidence that shatters your entire case, or someone important is put in mortal danger, and the music swiftly changes to a heavier soundtrack like the suspense theme. And that leads us to the topic of themes. When you look through the game's soundtrack, you'll notice that there are certain tracks composed specifically on a case-by-case basis. Literally. However, the majority of soundtracks serve specific purposes that you'll find in every game. These theme soundtracks have special names such as Investigation, Objection, or the iconic Pursuit themes. A great example of how the music is involved in player feedback is whenever you raise an objection in the game. Pointing out the contradiction in a witness testimony requires you to present a very specific piece of evidence on a certain statement, and there's plenty of opportunity to get things wrong. An easily identifiable manner of an incorrect objection is Phoenix Wright blurting out something incredibly stupid after presenting evidence, but that isn't actually the first piece of player feedback you get for an objection. No, in fact, the first piece of feedback you get actually lies in the audio. Every time you correctly identify an objection, the questioning theme cuts out just as Phoenix yells out, "Objection!" That silence also serves an additional purpose besides feedback. It leaves gap for Phoenix to introduce the contradiction to the court before switching over to the objection theme. Not only does this avoid a sudden abrupt change in the soundtrack, but it also makes the objection theme stand out when it does finally come out of the shadows. Speaking of which, it would be a criminal offense if I ignored talking about the objection themes in a video about Ace Attorney's sound design. The trial sections of the game are where you battle it out with the prosecution, who always start out with an unfair advantage over you. So the objection theme also has to avoid being too overbearing or repetitive, and often lasts for only a few lines of dialogue before the prosecution flips the entire case onto you. Every case has several witness testimonies which you have to point out contradictions in, so the objection theme is also partnered with the pursuit theme, which runs towards the end of the trial section when you're closing in on the truth and chasing down the witness's lies. The pursuit themes act similar to a boss battle music, telling the player that they're on the verge of breaking through the lies and making them feel like a badass. You'll notice that this is accompanied by a more assertive change in the defense's tone, much different from the silly and bashful nature of the rest of your lines. Also, the pursuit themes share this common format of an extremely intimidating intro, signifying that justice awaits the one who is guilty, which is immediately followed by a long, overarching and soaring melody that just feels so sick. And you'll notice this in all the pursuit themes. Sitting at the very end of Ace Attorney's sound design deck are the theme variations. The investigation themes are often split up into core, middle, and opening variations. The pursuit themes have an extra variation which skips the intro and jumps straight into the soaring melody. And the questioning themes have a heavier, more intense variation that is used just before you jump into the final objections of the case. These variation themes are used to place more emphasis on specific portions of the game and are usually placed towards the section endings to create exponential, gradually rising excitement within the player as they progress through the story. And remember, Ace Attorney is able to do all of this with just a handful of sound effects and music tracks, saving the budget of the original Phoenix Wright game and setting the stage for all to succeed in. This video was prepared in advance because I probably won't be able to upload until late January or February, so I wanted to put something out in between that gap. Hopefully, if I was able to edit everything in time, you should be seeing this video near Christmas time, so Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to all of you. Hey, and if you're new to the channel and like the video, why not consider subscribing? I'm an indie game developer who loves making VFX. Anyways, thank you for watching.